Welcome to Red Light, Green Light, the podcast where seasoned leaders and top-tier executives in science, tech, pharma, finance, and innovation open up and get real with me and with you. You'll hear personal stories from key moments of their career arcs and how they've struggled and succeeded when it comes to moving audiences from the red light of risk to the green light of go. I'm Cindy Skalicky, storytelling strategist and author of the best-selling book, Red Light, Green Light, How Top Leaders Present with Polish, Get Buy-in, and Become More Influential. On this podcast, you'll hear from an exceptional invite-only lineup of leaders who've been in the room and at the table when stakes were high, decisions were hard, and their stories had to land. This is where expert minds share stories that shape the future. What's more, you'll walk away with tips you can try immediately to drive the vision of innovation with your team. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to another episode of Red Light, Green Light. I am your host, Cindy Skalicky, and I have an incredibly fun episode to share with all of you today. I am so pleased and feel in the presence of some greatness, if you will, to be with Jim Johnson. And I want to read a brief sentence or two, Jim, that I wrote for your introduction so that we can frame it up for the audience. But wow, Jim's a basketball coach and player for his entire life. And some of you might already know about Jim and the incredible, miraculous story that he had a hand in crafting in 2006. On February 15th, 2006, Jim made a decision that would become one of the most unforgettable moments in high school basketball history when a player named Mack had been overlooked and ended up coming into the game and scoring 20 points in the last 3 minutes and change of his senior night basketball game. And this story, we're going to have Jim share kind of what it was like to be courtside. But it's so much about leadership lessons as well for so many of you listening who are facing questions around, when to tap that person on the shoulder and how to lead with empathy and authenticity, how to make decisions in the moment. And Jim, welcome to the show. So much to unpack.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes. Well, I want to quickly begin with, so Jim has written this wonderful book called A Coach and a Miracle, Life Lessons from a Man Who Believed in an Autistic Boy. And that's the story behind Mack, is that he is an autistic young man who loved basketball. But one of the quotes in here, Jim, I thought would be fun to kick us off, has to do with the scorekeeper page from the game.
Okay.
And Cheryl, I don't know how to say her last name, Tisa
is correct.
Tisa, she ended up running out of the room because of her efforts to try to mark all the baskets that Jason scored. She had a line of threes that overflowed in the fourth quarter box of the scorekeeper's book for the statistics for that night. Right. So I just can imagine the glee on her face and everyone's in the on the court and there that night. So take us back to 2006 and what transpired that night. Give us a recap.
Yeah, so I'll just give you a little context. So Jason tried out for our team 3 consecutive years. He tried out for the junior varsity, didn't make it, served as a team manager. I got to know him some because the JV and varsity would play back-to-back at most nights. And then he started to come to all our off-season workouts between his sophomore and junior, and he wanted to make the varsity. Didn't make the varsity his junior year, but served as the team manager for the team I coached. In fact, I'll tell you a quick little side story. At that point in my career, I been known as the coach that couldn't win the big one. We kept winning seasons, and we lose in our sectional tournament. And I
Okay.
remember the first team meeting we had after we chose the team, Jason's junior year. I walked into the team meeting. He immediately raises his hand. He says, I said, yeah, J Mac. He says, Coach, we know you've never won the Section 5 championship. I said, well, thanks, Jason, for the reminder.
Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, but he said that they were going to embrace, stay focused. We're going to help you win your first championship.
Oh my
And
gosh.
actually, we had a good year that year. We got to the semifinals now for the sixth time in my career. We lost at the buzzer to our crosstown rival. So I
Oh,
was devastated. But Jason was my inspiration because he came out again his senior year, and I never had a kid try out 3 years in a row without making
yeah,
it.
that's astounding.
So
Right.
so
Yeah.
when he didn't tried out his senior, I brought him in the office. I said, "I've got some good news and some bad news." He goes, "Coach, give me the bad news first." I said, "Well, unfortunately, you're not quite good enough to make the team." And he was visibly disappointed. You could tell he was upset. I said,
Sure.
"But I do have some good news." His head popped up immediately. I said, "I'd like to give you a uniform for senior night." And
Yeah.
he was pretty fired up. In fact, that
Yeah.
kid told that periodically he would ask me about the uniform during the season. And of course, I
Sure.
defined periodically is about every other day. He was pretty fired
Right.
up about that.
Okay. Fair.
Well, the other thing, because we had never won a Section 5 championship, we had a very good team that year. So
Mhm.
I thought maybe this year to break the barrier. And we started the season 2-0. We won a tournament. And then we had an implosion. We had a real struggle. It's all in the book. It's too
I
long to
read
share.
about it.
Yeah, but
Yes.
it
Oh,
divided the team and it made it
yeah.
very difficult.
Really
And
tough.
Jason was kind of our rock through a very difficult time. But
Mm.
fortunately, we finally, after struggling for really about 5 or 6 weeks, we started to get our team back together, and which led me to senior night, which was on February 15th of 2006.
Yeah.
And I gave him his jersey on February 13th. And Jason, just for context, was 5'9", about 120 pounds. So he was a
Okay.
little guy.
Yeah.
And the uniform was huge. So he did,
It's like
it,
swimming on him.
it was funny, but it was, but anyways, for the game. So it's a memory I will always cherish was the before that, because when we honor the seniors, Jason always wore a white shirt and black tie to the
Okay.
games.
Okay.
And now he's embracing his Patterson uniform, and that's a memory I will always cherish,
I love it.
to see that.
Yeah.
So the game begins. And we had a good student body following that called themselves the Six Men, and they start chanting at the beginning of the game, "We want J-Mac." I guess it's
Yeah.
just in case I forgot.
Of course.
And I really wanted to get him in, but I knew I had to get all the other players in fairness to.
Right.
And the second thing is I wanted to get him in with enough time so he could score a basket.
Yes.
So after 3 quarters, we got everybody in but Jason.
Mhm.
So I put him in with just over 4 minutes to go. And the first time he touched the ball, he had a 3-pointer from the corner and he let it go. And we had a pretty good crowd that night. We had like 800 or 900 people.
Yeah. It's a
And
lot.
I kind of gazed as he shot it, and everybody stood up. And Cindy, it misses by like 6 feet. It's not even
I
close. And
saw the video.
yeah, and we talked about, us being practicing Catholics, but I'm in a public school, and I know you're not supposed to pray in the public schools, but I was praying for
Yes.
please
Yes.
please, help him. Well, the second
Please,
shot he
please.
gets, he has
Yeah.
a short shot from about
Okay.
10 feet away, and this time
Mhm.
it hits the backboard, it hits the rim, and it falls off, and there's a
Okay.
collective groan from the crowd.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking to myself, "All right, God's starting to listen. We're getting
Right.
closer."
Right, right, right.
Third possession, he has another 3-pointer from the right wing. He lets it go. This time, magic. It goes in, and the place just erupts. And it felt like we had 10,000 people there. It was just pure bedlam.
Unbelievable.
And I'm crying because I just can't believe,
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
And then I got to fast forward, then I'll come back and finish a
Okay.
couple of things about the game. 6 months after that game,
Mhm.
Jason's idol was the late Kobe Bryant. Jason used to sign his name, I kid you not, Jason J. Mack Kobe McElwain. That's how much he
Okay.
liked Kobe.
Okay.
So Jason's at the ESPY Awards in California. He's up for the greatest sports moment of the year. And there's 4 finalists. And
Okay.
one of the other finalists is Kobe Bryant, his idol.
Right.
Kobe had scored 81 points in a Laker game that year, so he's up for the same award.
Oh
Jason
my
meets his
god.
idol and then beats him off for the ESPY. Well, how did he do
Unbelievable.
that? He didn't
Uh,
just make 1 3, came
right?
down, he made another 3, then he made a
Yeah.
basket where his foot was on the line, and then he missed a couple, and he made a couple, and the place is just going crazy.
Rocking.
And the 2 things I'll never forget, with a minute to go, I'm sitting on the bench, tears still flowing down my face. I can't believe what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And I get a tap on my shoulder. I'm shocked, I look
Yeah.
behind me, and it's Jace's mother, and she's
Oh.
bawling her eyes out, and she whispers to my ear, "Coach, this is the best gift you could ever give my son." And of course, what do? I cry harder. I was
Try
so
harder, right? Well, as
and
a
then
mom, I can
yeah,
feel how that
yeah,
would
it was
feel.
just truly
Oh,
unbelievable.
oh,
So then this is how the game ends. With about 10 seconds to go, I wanna give a kudos to our, opponent, Spencerport, that night.
yep.
They were really good sports, their
Mhm.
team and, the coach. But they score, and our player takes it out of bounds, and he normally, throws it to our point guard, but he
Sure.
throws it to J-Mac. So
Mhm.
J-Mac's dribbling down, and I'm looking at the clock, and it's ticking down 5, 4, and I'm thinking they're just gonna let him go in and make a layup.
Yeah.
Oh, no, he slows down. He pulls up like 2 feet behind the arc, almost an NBA three, and I'm thinking, "Jason, don't shoot for there. You're gonna ruin this moment." He launches this rainbow. Swish. I look up Cindy, and the whole crowd runs onto the floor. It's like the movie Rudy.
Yeah.
And then
I
I'll
know
never
that
forget because
movie.
our
Yeah.
players put him up on their shoulders. He's got the
Yeah.
game ball over his head. And at this point, I have no idea how many points he had. And our public address announcer comes on and says, "The leading scorer for Greece Athena tonight, J-Mac, with 20 points, including a school record tying 6 3-pointers." And it was
It's
truly
unbelievable.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
And, there's so much we can go into, but I'll say
Of
one
course.
thing that just touched my
Yeah.
heart deeply because we had
Mhm.
mentioned that we had some real challenges in the season.
Yeah.
But I had never asked the 4 players on the court to pass Jason the ball, but out of their own hearts, you talk about the essence of
Mm.
teamwork.
Yeah.
They passed the ball to him every possession. Although I do still kid Jay back that I'm still looking for your first assist. You done passed the ball once. But, it was, certainly,
Oh.
a night that
Yeah,
I've
absolutely
cherished for
magical.
life. So,
Magical. And
mm,
and I know there's so much, Jim, that went into befriending him in the earlier years prior to that moment, and,
right.
you talk in the book too about how you'd played on every part of the spectrum as a player.
Yeah.
You didn't make a team and you felt that you should have, and you also played on some other good teams, and you love coaching, and
Mhm.
it's just, and I appreciate coaches so much for the way they've, you know, come into young adults' lives at a pretty tumultuous time in almost
Right.
any coaching age and stage. Because I am like, I could not do that. Like, but it's just a very unique set of skills and patience that's required, and also the ability to push the kids so they're doing beyond what they might think is possible for themselves.
Right.
And, there's so much that we can glean from that. But as a lifelong coach, now that this is, 20 years ago that this
Right.
happened. Hey, listeners, super quick station break question for you. Have you ordered your copy of my new best selling book, Red Light, Green Light? Check it out. Grab your copy today at onpoint-communications.com/book. And now back to the show. Tell us what happened like beyond once that kind of happened and the awards were done and you went back to regular-ish life. Now what has marked the last 20 years or so for you with
Yeah.
this memory?
Well, the interesting part, I'll close the season, and then we
Yeah,
can
please.
get into a little bit,
Sure.
is the funny part is you talk about, because I talk about servant leadership, and
Yep.
Jason, after that game, he ends up explodes all over the world. It becomes a viral
Yeah.
video and goes
Unbelievable.
on,
Unbelievable.
ESPN, we were on Good Morning America,
Yeah.
CNN, and on and
Yeah.
on. And we were on Oprah. I mean, it was crazy. So, but
Crazy.
anyways, uh, Jason's gotta go back and be our team manager. And yet he embraces that, and the interesting thing is we end up winning our first championship that year
Oh
in
my
front of a sold out arena. In our area, we normally get 4 or 5,000 for a championship game. In our arena,
Okay.
it's just about 10. And we
Okay.
walk in at night for the championship game, and we have 10,000 people
Oh
there.
my
It's
gosh, Jim. Oh my
because
gosh.
we had so much media attention,
Oh my gosh.
and we ended up we were losing 13-3 after 4 minutes, and then we come back and we won the game right at
Oh,
the end. So
oh
it
my gosh.
was a thriller.
That's so
Uh,
fantastic.
but the really neat thing that, and then we can delve in a little bit more deeply with what's going on now, but is that after that season, Jason and I were interviewed a lot by the media, and I'll never forget, Cindy, because they would often ask him, Jason, what was the best thing about your senior season? And of course, they were expecting him to talk about his game. And he'd always throw the curveball because he would say, oh, winning the sectional championship. That was the best thing. And
Because
of
he
course,
was a passionate basketball player.
yeah,
Yes.
he was just love. In fact, Jason came back my last 8 years. I coached 10 years after that. And
Okay.
he came back and volunteered as an assistant for me for 8 years. So, and we ended up
Amazing.
winning 5 more championships
Oh my
together. So he was my
gosh.
good luck charm.
Oh,
Uh,
that's amazing.
but
That's just
so
incredible.
I had gotten really into personal growth. So I had listened to, I'm going to show my age, but guys like Jim Rohn and Tony
Mhm.
Robbins
Sure.
and Zig Ziglar,
Yeah.
and
Sure. Sure.
the list goes on and on.
Mhm.
And so I had done a little bit of speaking in the basketball world, but then of
Mhm.
course after that game, people started to reach out. And so I developed a speech called Dreams Really Do Come True. And the book is the first 6 keys that I talk about in helping
Mhm.
people make their dreams
Yep.
come true. And that's basically, and then I wrote the book, and that came out. And I taught and coached and had a family, and I was speaking on the side. And
Mhm.
I did that for 10 years. I enjoyed it. And then
Mhm.
when I retired in 2016, I started speaking full time. And when I did that, I loved leadership and I loved
Sure.
building team culture. So I started
Sure.
to add more arrows to my quiver. I do a leadership talk and I do a team culture talk. I
Yeah.
do a few other things. And
Sure.
and things were, I was enjoying it. And then this thing called COVID hit. And
Oh, right.
that kind of put a curveball because I didn't want to do virtual. I ended up doing some virtual.
Yep.
But I guess the blessing is we're on a podcast, and I knew very little about podcasts. I had heard of them, but, and
Sure.
I actually had been interviewed on a couple of them, but I
Yeah.
didn't listen to them.
Mhm.
And during COVID, I started, I was a big exercise guy and still am.
Sure.
And I was not the type of guy that would go out for a walk, but during COVID, I
Yeah, we
was.
all
I
did.
had to
We
get
all
outside.
got really good at
Yeah.
walking.
So, and when I started walking, I started putting in my AirPods and I started
Mhm.
listening to podcasts. And now I'm a junkie. I listen to all
Yeah.
kinds of podcasts,
Fantastic. That's
and I
so
started a
great.
podcast, which we're going to
Yeah.
have you on
Yeah.
later, called the
Yeah.
Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Great.
And the genesis for that was I started thinking, I became a head coach at 25 years old.
Wow.
And I took over a program that was pretty bad. And of course,
Mhm.
in my mind, I thought I was going to turn them from the outhouse to the penthouse in the first year.
Right, of
And
course.
it didn't work quite out that well. I
Huh,
ended up leading the
interesting.
team to 17 consecutive losses,
Wow.
and I
Yeah.
was on an interim position, and they did not renew my contract. So I guess in other words, you say you were fired, and it was
Right.
a pretty humbling experience. But in hindsight, it was probably a real blessing because I got a mentor after that, and his name was Bill Van Gundy. I coached a year with him, and ironically, his 2 sons ended up being head coaches in the NBA.
Right, right.
And then, I after that, I stayed mostly in high school, and that really
Yeah,
was my passion. But
amazing.
I learned a lot about, and the interesting thing is when I started realizing, because I think, in being a leader and, being a high school basketball coach, I had to have confidence in how to teach the game of basketball. But what I didn't do early, and then when I really started to become a student of leadership, that's when our program took off because I
Oh,
became a way
interesting.
better leader
Okay.
and, started to really focus on how to build great culture and learned
Mhm,
a lot about and how I could be a more effective
mhm.
leader. And,
Right.
those are all the things I now share with people on how to be a better leader of yourself and lead others,
Yeah.
that type of thing. So,
Well, that's really interesting as an insight about kinda like what the inflection point was for you as a
yeah,
coach, right? It was, well, when I started learning about leadership, it
yeah,
became more robust. Well, let's talk about, like, at on point when I'm talking about persuasion and leaders who need to engage their audiences, we are always talking about the need to balance head with heart. And
Mhm.
so I want to tap on the parts of your book and your experience, Jim, that relate to the heart part, which is the passion, and then the head part, which is decision making when it's
Mhm.
really tough. And so
Okay.
I loved your first chapter around passion. We
Mhm.
certainly devote a lot of time and resources with our leaders to help them discover and articulate their passion so
Right.
that they can actually do that when they're in a speaking situation that's high stakes, even if
Right.
it's just for a little bit. And then
Yep.
the other thing around decision making that's attracted to me has to do with how to like learn that intuitive nudge, maybe is what I'm guessing you might
Right.
lean into. But yeah, start wherever you want with that, Jim,
Okay.
and let's just go with one of those.
Well, I do believe that it's hard to be really highly effective if you don't really enjoy what you do.
Sure.
And people, they knew that I love coaching basketball. I
Mhm.
mean, that was one of my major passions in my life,
Sure.
and so, that was something that it was very dear in my heart, and I
Mhm.
put my heart and soul into that.
Mhm.
Uh, the other piece that, when I started to study leadership, the book that made a real impact early on me was, Stephen Covey's Doc 7
Yeah.
Habits of Highly Effective
Sure.
People,
Yeah.
and interesting, I read it in my 20s, and I didn't he talked about having a personal mission statement, and
Mhm.
I had never even heard of that, Cindy. I was like,
Yes. Of course, back then it wasn't a thing yet.
yeah. So, but I started to really think about it, and
Mhm.
I actually take people through steps of how I
Okay.
created it,
Okay.
and what I teach people because, I kid people, but there's so much truth in it. The first person you gotta lead is yourself,
Yeah.
and so,
That's perfectly
getting
true.
clarity about who you are. So, I talk to them about, I always say, what's your answer to this question? Why were you put on this earth? Or of your personal
Mhm.
faith, like we are,
Yeah.
why
Right.
did God put you on this earth?
Mhm. Yes.
And and then I talk to them about, I think you have to have clarity about your core values and most
Mhm.
important values,
Mhm.
and then trying to put that in a statement. For example, like my mission statement is to be an outstanding role model that makes a positive difference in the world by helping others make their dreams come true. And when
Amazing.
I established that, there's no right or wrong answer. It's what's
Right.
right for you.
Mhm.
But what it does is because leaders have to stand for something, I believe.
Right. Right.
And you can't stand for something if you're wishy-washy. If you don't know
Mhm.
what your core values are, if you don't know what your mission is, your
Mhm.
why, then it's very hard to stand. And why I think I became a much better leader is because my players knew what I stood for.
Right.
And I'll tell you a little quick little story that
Okay.
illustrates this.
Sure.
So towards the end of my career, we had some really good teams, and I had a very good player that ended up playing in the NBA for a couple of years.
Mhm.
And his sophomore year, I should say, we were in the sectional semifinals, and our team was really good. But
Mhm.
he, even though our team was really good, as a sophomore, he was still our best player. And our rule is we shot free throws on the days of games, and you had to be on time. If you didn't be on time as a starter, you didn't start.
Okay.
And he came in late. His name was Anthony, and he didn't start. And the team was not happy with me because they know that Anthony, but I held, that's what I
Yeah, good
stood for.
job. Rules are rules. Mhm.
We are going to be on time, and if not,
Mhm.
you have a consequence.
Mhm.
And the ironic thing is, the kid I put in for Anthony ended up scoring our first two baskets,
Oh,
so
nice. Well,
it made
see?
me look
When
good.
you move somebody
Uh,
out, there's someone who's ready to
yeah,
take their
yeah,
place.
next man up, as they say, and,
Yeah.
we ended up winning that game, and we ended up winning the championship that year, so, but, I think those are the things is really having clarity, and I remember my assistant coach got calls from a lot of our players that day during
Mhm.
school, "Can you
Mhm.
talk coach out of it?" He said,
Oh,
"Coach isn't gonna make a change." He
yeah.
goes, "That's what he believes. He's gonna stay with,"
Yes.
you know? So
Well,
I
Jim,
think
I just wanna
you
pause
go
for
ahead.
1 second there because
Sure.
one of the things that I heard you say underneath that is something that that I talk a lot about, which is you have to slow down to speed up, and you had to
Mhm.
slow down, and we have to slow leaders down
Right.
and to teach them those steps to like, clarity doesn't just land in our laps, we
Yeah.
have to think about it,
Right.
and in such a busy world and with so many busy things in our calendars, people often mistake that we can come up with these brilliant things by just continuing through the motions. It's like, no, you
Right.
have to stop and you have to, but once you got clear, that's what I heard. Once you got really clear, you could go forward and you
Right.
changed the way that you led and the way that you coach, and your players felt it. When you had
Right.
that clarity of mission, they could see it too. And so
Right.
slowing down to speed up is a big piece
Yeah.
of all leadership. So, yeah, great. Okay, keep
And I
going.
think the other thing is,
Mhm.
really getting a team to buy into the mission
Right.
themselves. So, our mission was to help create winners on and off the court.
Yeah.
And I kid leaders that you should be the CRO, the chief reminding officer, that you gotta
Okay.
be
Yeah, for sure.
continuing to share and
Yeah.
lead. And, one of the things we talk about with our core values is having clarity of what they are, but what are the behaviors that match those values? And what's the
There.
behaviors?
Yes.
For example, like winners on the court was, yeah, winning the scoreboard was part of that, but also were
Sure.
you a great teammate? Were you someone that could handle adversity?
Mhm. Yep.
Off the court, were you the best student you could be? Were you
Right.
someone that was a contributing member of our community? So
Mhm.
those are things we were trying to teach our through the avenue
Sure.
of basketball
Yeah.
every day.
Right.
And one thing I remember when the first program I took over before I came to my hometown, we talked about mission, and they said, "Coach, we want to win. We've been losing for years." And
Right.
I said, "Well, I want to win too."
Right.
I'm not saying that, but what I found in all my studies is whether it's an athletic team or a business, if your only goal is to make profit, those businesses rarely last.
Yep.
It's got to be a
Yep.
bigger mission, and it's got to be
Yeah.
bigger than you. And that's
Yes.
the same thing we talked about with our team.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
interesting thing is when you have clarity of mission and everybody
Mhm.
buys in, that the results end up usually taking care of itself, I think,
Yes.
you know?
It's amazing how that happens when you
Yeah,
have clarity. Yeah.
yeah.
It's so true. It's so true. Hey, listeners, super quick station break question for you. Have you ordered your copy of my new best-selling book, Red Light, Green Light? Check it out. Grab your copy today at onpoint-communications.com/book. And now back to the show. Well, I'm thinking of the decision making that you've had to do in your life, Jim, and from the decision to make, to have JMac go in at that certain time, which is really beautifully described in the book about how you didn't want him to just have a chance for one shot, take it or leave it. You wanted to give him a buffer. Then you had to make another decision about the other people who mostly sat the bench that year. They needed a turn too. So there's a
Right.
whole orchestra of things you had to do just in that one game. And then I'm thinking too of the championship game where you walk in and there's 10,000 people and it's sold
Mm,
out and you're easily tempted to focus on the hype of the moment. No, you have a team to take to a victory, and the decision of mindset and how to turn off that noise and focus on your players. So, tell us about your journey of decision making and maybe some of the bumps and bruises and maybe some of the moments where you're like, "Oh, that's what I need to be doing more of." How does that look for you?
Well, I think when I became a much better leader is when I was more open. I use, in education, we had a lot of acronyms, and I still use them, the CQA, this chief question asker.
Oh,
And
yeah. Oh, I
early
love
in my
that.
career,
Mhm.
I thought I was know-it-all instead of the
Sure.
learn-it-all. And when I
Sure.
made that transition and started to ask my players and my staff and really showing that I listened to them, and one of the lessons I learned is that people wanna feel like they're being heard.
That's
And
right.
when you do that, and I'll give you an example, like, if someone was a player or my assistant gave me a suggestion, I would usually say 1 or 2 things. I say, "That's really good, and we're gonna implement that very quickly."
Mhm.
And then I have to follow through.
You have to do it.
Or
Mhm.
I would say, "I really appreciate your suggestion. Right now, I don't think that's the right fit, and here's why." Now, they
Mhm.
may not agree, but at
Right.
least they knew where I was coming
Yeah.
from
Right.
because they felt
Right.
like they were being heard, and I
Right.
think that was a really helpful thing in making
Mhm.
decisions.
Mhm.
And then the
Yeah.
other thing is I think, I became very good at putting things in writing. So,
Okay.
like, I would
Huh.
write out my objectives for every day. I call it my MVPs, my most
Mhm.
valuable priorities,
Okay.
and making sure and then the same thing when I would go through a game plan, these are the things and, of course, in a game, you got a plan A, you better have plan B, and you
Yep.
probably should have
E,
plan
D, and
C.
E.
Right.
Right.
So, just having those adjustments and going through and gaining experience and then, like one of the things I encourage my staff on the bench is I want them to pepper me ideas. Now,
Mm.
in that situation, I got to make a lot of decisions very quickly.
Yes.
And so
Right.
but what I would tell my staff is most of your things you share with me, I'm not going to do.
Yeah.
But I want you to keep pepper me
Yeah.
because something's gonna strike. I'll give you a quick story.
Mhm.
One year, we're playing in a tournament in Pennsylvania. It was a great game, 2 very good teams,
Mhm.
and it gets down to the final, like, 15 seconds of the game, and our opponent is down a couple points, and they call timeout, and they have the ball.
Mhm.
And we were predominantly a man-to-man team,
Okay.
and my JV coach, my right-hand man said to me, "Coach, go zone right now." And
Oh.
I said, "Steve, we don't really do a lot of zone." He goes, "They will not know what to do," because they
Mm.
were predominantly man to man. So I
Mhm.
listened to him, and we did, and he was absolutely right. They were
Oh,
like
I
deer
love
in
it.
the headlights, and we ended up winning the game.
Oh,
But this is a big thing I learned as a leader. When you take suggestions, you better praise them for it. So I was
yes.
interviewed by the
Oh,
local media
absolutely.
afterwards, and one of the first questions of a media person was, "Coach, why did you go zone? You played man the whole game."
Yeah.
They said, "Because my JV coach gave me
Yes,
that
giving
suggestion."
credit
Yeah,
where credit
yeah,
is due.
exactly.
Well, I'm gonna mark our episode just slightly here because this is so funny, Jim, but, we're recording this in the middle of we're about to approach, the Final Four for
Right.
this year, and, ironically, I went into mass on Saturday night, and Duke was w up heartily and healthily over UConn, and I came out, looked at my phone, and almost dropped it. Because that's the description that the UConn coach shared about the decision they made to do the play that they did was because they knew the games and the floor and the other players so well that they pulled something that wasn't going to be expected. And this young freshman
Yeah.
from I forgot where, but I mean,
From
there's a
Indiana.
yeah, oh yeah, from Indiana, and there's a great video circulating right now of the announcers who are absolutely dumbfounded
Yeah,
by the three-pointer that won the game and knocked Duke out of the whole
yeah,
tournament. I mean,
yeah,
it's just these moments are so electrifying, and they
yeah, they
happen
are.
on the court, and they happen in teams and in meetings and in
Yeah,
business too, and
right.
it's not all that far-fetched to have
No,
these kinds of exciting moments, I've heard from some of our clients, like, people were clapping Cindy in the meeting because of the way the person presented the
yeah,
storyline, and that's like, "What?" It's not JMac worthy, but it's closer. Um, and it's just that heartfelt excitement, it gets us going in our neurotransmitters and in our physiological health, and we create this belonging and sense of community and culture when we have those kinds of things racing through our veins, and so,
right.
um well, I wanna kind of, wind us toward the end, although we could talk for such a long time,
Yeah,
Jim. But I couldn't help but love the opening of the book because it's written by the head coach at, UF, which is happens to be where my second daughter goes to school right
yeah,
now, and who was part of and at all the winning games from last year at the Final Four
mhm,
and when they won the final game, last year. But what stuck out to me was how Billy talks about the way the team that year went to the hotel room
mhm,
and talked, with J-Mac at the shoot around that he had missed and, kinda hung out with him and how it really changed the players to be
mhm,
around J-Mac and to be with
yeah.
him. So, can you speak to what it's like to be inspired from the player's perspective and what you've heard over the years for the way you've, brought him into the fold?
But, I think the one thing, Billy Donovan, we stayed at his hotel and we got to know him, and I was really honored that he would write the foreword. But you know
Yeah.
what I really learned and through my journey that I really encourage leaders is, you should be the chief storyteller. And the
Mhm.
people and one things I got pretty good at, and of course, I'm a speaker, so I'm
Sure.
I'm hoping I'm even better because you got to become a compelling
That's
storyteller.
right.
But one of the things I did almost every day during practice, sometimes pre-practice, sometimes post-practice, is share stories. And I
Yeah.
share stories of both warnings and examples. And
Yeah.
so I would talk to them about, like, a illustration might be, I might talk about a pro player that's a very good player, but his team never wins.
Yeah.
And we talk about that. Why is it, he has great statistics,
Mhm.
his team doesn't win. And then, 2 days later, I'd say, hey, this guy doesn't have quite the statistics of the guy we talked about the other day,
Yeah.
but his team always wins. Why? And
Yeah.
we have a discussion about that.
You
And
anchor
so,
it. Mhm.
yeah, so
Mhm.
exactly. So, the stories, people remember stories, they learn
Right.
from stories,
Mhm.
they're inspired by stories.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that as a leader, we really got to be thinking about how
Mhm.
can we be a compelling storyteller,
Mhm.
and, people like yourself that help people with that's a really powerful thing that I think very much gets overlooked,
Right.
because, you know, uh, it's funny because, I have points on all my different presentations, but they always come back and, the first thing you talk about, wow, that story was
Yeah.
unbelievable, and so,
Yeah. I
that's
mean,
what they remember. So,
it's so powerful. Storytelling is 13 times as powerful as a piece of data, which is
yeah,
statistically
yeah,
researched. And you are actually a supremely prime example of how a story sticks and
yeah,
all the lessons that come out of just knowing what happened that day. We can tease apart so many things from it. I often think about a story like a disco ball, and the story is the disco ball, and then there's thousands of ways to look at the story or reflect the story to different
mhm,
audiences, situations, times of life, and they are so bright and reflect light and help us enjoy the room and the vibe that we're in to keep going on the disco ball, right? But
absolutely.
it really is powerful to do that and to be I mean, I know that you just feel blessed to have been part of this moment
Mhm,
of J Mac's life and how like it's changed your own so deeply, right?
right,
So,
yeah.
do you have any final, reflections on the faith nature and this sort of the otherworldly essence of this moment that would be interesting to share as an inspiration?
Yeah, so I'll say 2 things. I think one is, that certainly, you just never know, but I think if you consistently do the right things, uh,
Mhm.
things tend to happen more positively. Now, it doesn't always work that way, and God's gonna put some adversity in your life, so
Sure.
but he wants to see how you handle it.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I'm really at a movement right now
Mm.
that I encourage leaders that we have to be kinder to each other, and we
Yes.
gotta spread more kindness to each
Yes.
other.
Yes.
And, I mean, I felt very blessed that, I could give Jason an opportunity.
Yeah.
And, like, he's down in Florida right now. I just talked to him today, and
Oh,
he talked to a
nice.
school yesterday, and he was all fired up, but
Yeah.
the ability to spread a nice message and be
Mhm.
kind to people and show that
Mhm.
you care about them,
Mhm.
that's something I think we really gotta get back to.
Absolutely. Well, that reminds me of our last piece here, Jim, before we ask how can people reach you and stuff like
Yeah.
that. This concept of collective joy.
Mhm.
I want to tap that just for a second here because you describe so beautifully and like slowly and with such great drama the moments of the game and then the eruption, the electricity in the gym that day. And I was reading the experience and thinking of a piece that I've written around baseball when the Cubs won the World Series. And there
Right.
is something so unique about collective joy, meaning you can't really feel joy to that level unless you're with other people and
Right.
until you have this explosion that's shared joy. And so,
Right.
you experience that right down to your toes without question. So, I must have lived with you for a long time. Do you have any relevant, just thoughts on collective joy in life and some of the things that you've thought
Well,
about?
I think I'm right with you that the most joyous moments is happen when I was with a group of people, whether you call it as a team,
Hmm.
where we reached something possibly didn't even think we could reach.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that gave me the greatest joy. And I think the hard part is, like, sometimes I had teams that didn't have as much talent as other teams,
Mhm.
but because they loved each other and they
Mm.
spread that joy, they
Mhm.
ended up doing better than teams that I had some more talent because the
Interesting.
joy wasn't
Yeah.
there, you know?
Yeah.
And so that ability to each day to build that cohesive unit is something really special.
Mhm.
When you can
Mhm.
celebrate
Yeah.
together
Yeah.
with something that you feel like everybody had a part of, you know,
Yes.
and that's the pure joy. And
Yes.
I know you being a Cubs fan, and we kidded that my youngest brother is a Cubs fan, so
Yeah.
you guys have had a lot of agony over your
Yeah.
life. So,
Yeah. 108 years in between World Series wins.
so, but
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you, Jim, for coming here to share some of your moments with us. This was sort of a special edition in a sense because we focused really on the heart part and the mindset part of some spectacular stories that you've experienced and brought to life. So, really appreciate your time together today and to bring to our listeners some real inspiration that's rooted in collective joy, risk taking, and just beautiful moments of team building and belief in someone that you just had your eye on and God put in front of you. So
yeah, yeah.
it's wonderful. Any when we share our episodes, where would you like people to find you the easiest, and how can they reach you, Jim? You have a
Yeah,
very
so
common first and last name. So how
yeah.
do you
So,
do
well,
that?
I have a website that has all our information. It's coachjimjohnson.com. We
Okay.
have our, email that you can reach out. We have a phone number there that you can reach out to myself or my speaking manager,
Yeah.
and we also have a lot of free things. We do a free newsletter. We do a free weekly blog that you can sign up for, and also we have a podcast called the Limitless Leadership Lounge. We
Yeah.
help young and emerging leaders, and I do a
Amazing.
lot of posting. I do a success thought on every day on LinkedIn and Facebook and X and Instagram, and then I do what I call a daily dose of leadership that I do every single
Nice.
day. And I do a book recommendation every Wednesday. I'm an avid reader, and I also
Okay.
do some podcast recommendations. So I try
Amazing.
to give back and help
Yeah.
people, with their journey in their life.
Fantastic. Well, I know there's a lot of listeners out there who might want to shake it up with a sports speaker who's going to rock their room. So, folks, if you're listening and you want to reach out to have Jim speak, this is where you can find him and let him know you heard his story here with us today. Thanks, Jim.
My pleasure, Cindy. It was great
Be
to
here
talk
with
to you.
you. Yes. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Please don't forget to hit share and like and send this episode and the storyline to a friend or a family member who would enjoy it. We will be back again next week with another fantastic leader to share their stories. And in the meantime, you have a job, which is to get out there, find yourselves an audience of stakeholders, get them from the red light of risk to the green light of go, and get out there and nail it. Have a great week, everybody. Bye bye.